Hey, Lead Up Podcast listeners, Mike Harbour. This is episode 433 of the Lead Up Podcast. I've got a new guest with me. I'm really excited to share with you on this episode. We're going to talk about leadershifting, the Leadershift playbook by Phil Wilson. Book is available April the 1st, 2025. So if you're listening to this after that date, go to Amazon. I'll make sure Phil tells you where to find the book before we get off today. Go to Amazon, get a copy of the book. If you're listening before the release, then make sure after April 1st, you go to especially Amazon. We'll make sure you have Phil's contact info as well so you can reach out to him. Phil, welcome to the Lead Up Podcast. So good to have you.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited. I get to interview a ton of people in my life. Phil, I tell people I've done over 10,000 interviews in my life. Not all podcast interviews, mind you. I used to be a headhunter. I recruited leaders for healthcare organizations. And so I would do, 10, 15, 20 interviews a day to find one candidate for a position in the organization. And so over the years, I've literally interviewed tens of thousands of people. And now, the last several years, 8 or 10 years, I guess, I started the Lead Up podcast in 2019. But before that, I was a co-host of a podcast for John Maxwell, where we interviewed leaders for that as well. And so that was opportunity to interview lots and lots of people as well. But really excited to have you here today because I love the topic of leader shifting. I'm often talking about leader shifting. John Maxwell wrote a book called Leadershift. And I often say, you got to shift your leadership. You got to shift your communication style, your mindset, all of those things. But tell the audience about leadership, your philosophy of leadership, and what that really means to you and why you wrote the book.
Yeah, Mike. So the book is about my own shift over the last 5 years and how that applies to other leaders. So in my own organization, we went through a cultural transformation over the last 5 years. And I start off the book talking about like being on the top of Mount Stupid, and Mount Stupid is a reference to like the Dunning-Kruger effect. But while I was traveling all over the country, teaching people about being an approachable leader, which was my last book, I realized, not through my own reflection, but through some tough feedback from my own team, that I was the cobbler, whose children had no shoes. I was not doing a great job of leading my own company. And so what I learned through that process was these 4, shifts in my own thinking. And then I'm trying to also teach how those apply to really any leader in any kind of an organization. And so that's kind of the through line of the book, is that there's these really 4 important shifts that you have to make as a leader to understand your impact, then understand yourself, your belief in others, and then finally your belief in your relationships. So those are the 4 shifts that I focus on.
I love that. I want to spend just a little bit of time because you shared something with me already that I needed to hear about the toughest person to lead.
Mm-hmm.
Who is that?
Yeah, leading yourself is tough. It's tough unless you. So the story that I tell in the book is about Debbie. We run a process here in our company called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. So Gino Wickman, who was kind enough to endorse the book, he came up with this system called EOS. So we run our company using EOS, and a key role in a company that runs that way is what's called the integrator. And so I decided that Debbie, who had been our office manager in our company for years, and had worked with my dad, that she would be the perfect integrator. So I kind of waltzed back to her office, and I'm getting ready to offer her this great new role in the company. And she's like, "Hey, Phil, I appreciate it, but I probably should tell you something that you might not want to hear. But I told your dad he's not allowed to retire until I'm ready to retire, because I'm never going to work for you."
Wow.
And that was a wake up call, obviously. Now Debbie's amazing, and we have had like a great run together, but I needed to hear that. And going back to like the hardest person to lead is yourself, a shortcut there, Mike, is remember that the people that you lead are like your customers, right? The product that you have for them is your leadership. So go do customer surveys a lot. Ask your customers, like, what should I stop doing? Is there something, what do I do that you like that you want me to keep doing? What should I do more of? What should I do less of? Like those conversations are really critical. And the more that you're having those kinds of conversations and then running the process that we run, that really is part of how we live every day now. But that, if you take that stuff to heart and you actually work on yourself, the feedback will come to you, and you'll be told like what you need to work on, and then just commit to working on that.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that idea. I wrote this book, Quit Losing Talent. I mentioned to you before we got started,
Mhm.
and I teach a tactic called the talent lock conversation. And if we want to quit losing talent like Debbie, that's valuable to us,
Mhm.
we better know what would be a reason they would leave.
Yeah.
And so I teach leaders how to have a talent lock conversation from time to time with their team, and so that we can get them locked into our values, our mission, our purpose, and our leadership. And hopefully most leaders have a Debbie that will tell them the truth, right? That
Mhm.
I remember one of the early lessons I got, Phil. I was in the Army. I was a young leader. I've always gravitated toward leadership roles, always thought I was a leader. I'm pretty good because I'm aggressive, I'm assertive, I don't mind, taking shots, those kind of things. I think,
Mhm.
you have to be those things to be a good leader. But I wasn't always good at taking my own leadership advice, right? And I
Mhm.
had a soldier who I outranked who reported to me, and it's not always a good thing in the military to question
Yeah.
your leaders.
True.
I did that, by the way. I did that a lot. It got me
Mhm.
in trouble some because I questioned others' leadership as
Yeah.
well. But I had a subordinate in the military who questioned my leadership, a directive that I was giving, and they questioned, "Well, you're not doing that." And
Mhm.
and they were right.
Mhm.
I wasn't doing what I was asking to do, and I never want to be that leader that asks someone else to do something I'm not willing to do or I'm not doing, right? Because
Yeah.
our leadership ripple effect is a reflection of how we show up. So talk about that a little bit about what are some things a leader must do in order to develop their ability to create a better ripple, so to speak, Phil?
The first shift that I talk about in the book, Mike, is your impact, your belief in your impact. And, a trap that a lot of people, especially like a frontline leader, a first level leader who's early in their career, maybe just got promoted from maybe a lot of times the mistake companies make is they promote the star individual contributor and they're just like, hey, today you're now a supervisor of the same people you were working alongside yesterday, and you do the job great. So you go in there and all of a sudden everybody else around you now is a failure because they can't do the job as good as you. And you don't have the tools to deal with that. And you create all kinds of negative ripples when you put somebody in that position. And so that first shift that I talk about, and the ironic thing is, Mike, I know you know this, but those first level leaders and even mid-level managers often they'll talk themselves into this place of what I do doesn't really matter that much. I can't really change the rules. I can't change the policies. I don't have that much influence. And they'll talk themselves out of stepping into that leadership role. So that first shift is really that. And I talk about the placebo, everyone knows the placebo effect, right? So, you give someone a sugar pill and it'll cure a disease if you think it will. Well, there's also something called the nocebo effect, and it's true. If I give you a sugar pill, but I'm like, now be careful and let me know if you experience any of these side effects because this pill does have some side effects. People will experience, muscle pain and cramping and like all the stuff that would be on the outside of a bottle just because you told them that. Well, we as leaders can either be the placebo effect. Here's the good things that are happening, or we can be the nocebo effect.
Mm,
Watch out. Here's all the negative things that might happen. And those negative side effects you actually create if you're not careful.
that is so good. Love that. Yeah, I mean, I often say, if you want to be a good leader, start with self. and start between your ears. We
Yeah.
have to shift the way we think about leadership, right? And you make a great point here. Most leaders get promoted in the world that I work, but in most worlds, most leaders get promoted because they're really good at what they do. That's what happened to me. I was really good. Like in the Army, I got promoted easily because, what I love about the Army, it's very like, do this and you get promoted, right? Like
Yeah.
get this skill, go to this school, do this thing, excel, and you'll get promoted. And I love that because I'm a goal achiever, right? That's easy for me, but that did not make me a good leader.
Yeah.
Being a good leader is what really changed me, and it took me a long time. Even when I was in the Army, I was working on this, but I still wasn't great at it. I had to change my thinking first, like just the whole responsibility of leadership, like I'm serving others. I love that analogy of, the customer. I'm serving others,
Yeah.
they're my customer. And I'm really good. I grew up in a family of self-employed people, and we were always really good at taking care of the customer, right? I learned that from my grandmother and my dad, take care of the customer. So I'm really good at that. But that means my wife, my kids, my employees, my team members, people that work for me are also my customers as well. So what are some things that you recommend for the leader to begin to step in and be a good servant leader, customer service agent to those people they lead?
Well, I've already given one hot tip, which is just ask, right? When was the last time you asked your wife, how am I doing as a husband, or your kid, how am I doing as a dad, or your team, how am I doing as your leader? And we have a quarterly conversation. That's what it's called, quarterly conversation with each person that reports to a leader here, sits down quarterly with each individual on their team. And a big part of that conversation is just, how am I doing? Am I serving you well? So that's kind of number one. Another big one, the second shift that I talk about, is your belief in yourself. And a big part of that, you already talked about this, but a big part of that is kind of catching ourselves in the patterns that we often can find ourselves in. So take that first level leader that we just talked about. They're in this world of, I could do this job so well, and I'm really great at performing these tasks, that now I'm leading people that are supposed to do those tasks. And I look around and all I can see is that they don't know how to do it as well as me, and they can't produce as much as me, and their quality is not as good as mine was. You get into this mindset where you're just looking for all the things that are wrong. And so one of the most important things you can do as a leader is recognize when those trigger points are happening, and change the pattern. And I talk in the book about what's called a pattern interrupt. And but the idea of a pattern interrupt is at the point where you feel it's like, oh, I need to go correct something. That's your signal to yourself to go the opposite way. Figure out a way to celebrate this moment instead of getting ready to go criticize this person. And if you can catch yourself in those moments, your behavior will be different. You're going to, instead of trying to think about what am I going to tell this person, you're going to be in your head. Like you just said, you're going to be thinking in your own, like, how can I contribute how can I make this a positive interaction? I just left a meeting with a group of leaders, and somebody said something in there I had never heard before, but there are no neutral interactions. And I love that.
Yeah.
You as the leader, going back to the first shift, you're having an impact one way or the other. I either am having a positive impact or I'm having a negative impact, but just go in with the assumption that there is no neutral interaction. So I got to make this positive or negative, but it's going to be one of those two.
Yeah, that's good. We could go really deep here. I don't want to do all the teaching because I got a lot of thoughts on that. How does a leader determine neutral positive or negative?
Yeah. So in the book I talk about, I'm sure you teach this too, but theory X and theory Y, but there are your theory about people and your assumptions about people. And this kind of goes into the third shift that I talk about in the book, but your assumptions about people are going to change the words that you say, They're going to change the way that you behave around them. And the research is stunning on this, but you actually change performance just based on your beliefs about the people around you. And so the key thing there is, the theory X is the idea that people want to be great. People come to work to grow, to do great things, to contribute. And that's my belief about people. And then theory X is the opposite. I call that, there's the hero assumption, which is that theory Y idea. And then there's the villain assumption, which is what's called theory X, which is my belief about people is that they are just trying to get away doing the least amount that they can. They have to be watched like a hawk, or they are just going to like loaf around and not do their job. And people are basically lazy. And that's my assumption about people. Mm-hmm. And if you live in a world where you're a leader and you have that belief about people, you are going to do and say and behave in ways that are going to create all kinds of negative performance in your team. And then on the other side, if you believe that your team wants to be great, even on days that they're not doing that great, you're going to react to that differently. And that reaction is going to create great performance.
Yeah, that's so good. Man, I could go a lot of different ways there. Number one, you use assumption. I use biases. We have these biases in our life, right?
Yeah.
And some of them are conscious or unconscious.
Yep.
And we have to be really careful about letting our biases get in the way of good leadership. I was just with a company this week, and they're rolling out. We're helping them, roll out a new performance eval plan and process. I'm not a fan of annual reviews. Mm-hmm. I wish I could get rid of them all, because I'm a more of a fan of like regular coaching, monthly coaching.
Right. Yeah, me too.
And you wouldn't need an annual performance review, but we're still in the world where HR believes you got to have those, right? So until we get there, I want to help companies do it right. But one of the things I warn them on is the idea of recency bias. We often evaluate people on recent things that have happened, right? The last 30 days. Well, Phil's done great the last 30 days, or Phil's really sucked the last 30 days. And that's how, versus, that's why I'm a fan of the more regular coaching, because now it's more equitable to the individual, right? They're getting a true annual review at that point. But that's just a bias or an assumption that Phil hasn't worked hard the last 30 days. Therefore, he's
doing a regular conversation gets recency bias working in your favor, right?
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Another bias I talk about is actor observer bias. So the actor observer bias it's the same thing that happens in traffic. When someone cuts you off, they're a crappy driver. But when you cut someone else off because like they wouldn't let you in, you're a great driver. They're still the crappy driver. So your observance of things is you have this bias. We all have it. So you have to it's another one of these things where you have to catch yourself. When you see somebody that's struggling or whatever, the actor observer effect tells us we're going to assume there's something wrong with them is the reason they're struggling. But when you're struggling, there's a lot of factors going on around here that's causing me to struggle. It's not a problem with me. And that is like wired into us. And so it's not good if you're a leader to have that mindset. You have to flip that switch.
Yeah, that's so good. Absolutely. Leaders have to learn this all between the ear stuff. Yeah. I mean, you hit something on the driver analogy. I was thinking back to your theory X. If we believe somebody's lazy, first thing I talk to leaders about is, okay, what laziness are you projecting onto others? Like, are you being lazy in area? Maybe you're a lazy leader, a lazy communicator, you're lazy at setting clear expectations. So they look lazy, but you haven't set clear expectations for them. So they have nothing to do. They're twiddling.
Or haven't taught them, or haven't there's all kinds of reasons that people can struggle. And that's the actor observer bias though, right? That's their problem. And you just, that right there is the switch that you have to flip. The pattern interrupt is when I see someone struggling, I have to go, what have I done? I have totally blown it here. I got to figure out how to lead them better like that. If you can make that flip, you don't need them to have a whole bunch of tools and go to a bunch of classes. And like, if you can make that flip, you're going to say the right things. You're going to do the right things because your brain is in the spot of, oh, this is my problem to repair, not I need to fix this other person.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. People project things. I was just coaching one of my, so in the work we do like you, training development, but we do a ton of one-on-one coaching with the people that we work with as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was coaching one of the participants in one of our programs we're doing, and she had just had a conversation with her leader, who is kind of new as her leader,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of months. And her leader told her that one of her concerns with her is her ability to time manage.
Mm.
Now, this leader is a regional leader, so she doesn't see this particular person all the time. She inherited her from someone else, and she didn't really give her any specifics as to what she meant by being a better time manager, right? And so my
Mm-hmm.
coaching was, okay, you need to have another meeting with your leader and say, give me an example of where I've like not managed time well, where you think I'm not getting, things done in a timely manner. Because in order for somebody to get better, they do need some
Yeah.
examples or some specifics and then tools to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But when you talk about actor, what'd you call it?
Actor observer
Actor
bias.
observer. Sometimes leaders, they kind of, especially like in regional roles,
Mm-hmm.
they get to observe once in a while, and
Yeah.
therefore that's what when they observe in that one moment, they believe your whole life is that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't
A
know if
lot
you've
of
had any
times, like
experience
someone
with
in that role, like parachutes in unannounced or with very little notice, and then the unorganized person on their team is actually just busy and weren't maybe prepared for the meeting. And so like the one moment that you observe them, you're like, oh, well, you don't manage your time well, when it's actually the leader that doesn't manage their time well.
Yeah, you hopped in and wanted a meeting, and I had a
Mhm.
plan. Yeah, you blew that
Right.
up, right? I love
Yeah.
that. That's so good. We could talk about that a
Yeah.
lot. You mentioned something earlier I want to go back to. You called it, Mount Stupid.
Mhm.
What do you mean by Mount Stupid, and how does one get there?
Yeah. So this is the Dunning-Kruger effect is the basic idea. So Dunning-Kruger is this notion that when we start to do something hard, and I don't know if there's anything harder than leadership, but anyway, leadership's a hard subject. So when we start with no knowledge, we just got the promotion and we're like, I had never done this before. I don't know what I'm doing. That's actually a great place. You don't know anything and you don't know anything. The next thing that happens though, and this is the steep part of the curve, which ends at Mount Stupid, that you start to learn some, you listen to a few podcasts, maybe you read a book, and now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I got this. I get now how to be a leader. And now you're up at the top of the mountain where you know almost nothing, but you think you know a lot. Okay, that is Mount Stupid. And Mount Stupid is where you believe you're a good leader, but you really aren't. And you don't really know how to tell the difference.
Mm.
And so then what happens generally is that you get kicked off the top of Mount Stupid, just like when Debbie talked to me about my own leadership here, and you come tumbling down to the valley of despair, is what it's called. And so the valley of despair is when you're like, oh, now you're back on solid footing though. I don't know as much as I thought I knew, and this is hard. And now the next march up is winning. You are now realistic about what you know and what your capabilities are, and you know that you have to learn and grow to kind of get up to that mountaintop, and that it's hard work. And then just to be safe, I just always assume I'm on Mount Stupid still. So
Mhm.
so you keep working at this. It's a practice. It's not something you solve. And you have to work at it every day. And I have all kinds of things that I can work on. And I have to my team, and we coach them. I just last week I went into someone's office and I was like, hey, I need to know this one thing. And they're newer on the team. And of course, everyone drops whatever they're doing. And I don't even ask. They just drop whatever they're doing. And we start spending time on it. But I've gotten to the point now because anyone who's been here for a while just goes, Phil, get back in your box. That's like everybody knows that it is fine to tell me to go back into my box. in that particular case, I caught myself and I was like, okay, stop. Don't let me do this to you. I do this all the time. And it's something I'm working on, but like, don't let me come in and train. If I ask you to do something, you ask me, what of the other important things that I'm doing today should I drop to chase this rabbit trail? And then we can have a conversation about where this sort of fits in the priority list. But I still have to work on that. I have to work on it all the time. And I even have to train my own team to kind of help me catch myself.
Mm, that's good. I love what you said. I've unfortunately myself feel have been in the valley of despair way too many times. So I could make the climb, think I got it figured out, I
Mhm.
fall. And
Yeah.
like you now, I try to stay on top of Mount Stupid and just be, I call it growth minded, right? Like I don't know what I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I need to keep growing. I need to keep learning. I'm constantly, I've got a copy of your book. Guess what? This will get read because,
Mhm.
it'd be easy for me to say, yeah, I know all this stuff, but what's the one thing I don't know? I want to find
Mhm.
that one nugget in your book that I don't know that I can grow myself with. So I'm
And it's good to
constantly,
be reminded of the stuff you do know, right?
yeah, yeah. Look, that's a great point, Phil. I love that because I'm often asking people, okay, you know this, are you doing it?
Right.
Right? You want
Yep.
to talk about that a minute?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that knowing doing gap. So the last book I talk about, the third component of being an approachable leader is we call support or right action. But the basic idea of right action is, do you do what you say you're going to do? Do you know what you're supposed to do and do that? And so that's a really critical behavior to, you can do everything else right as a leader. You can say all the right words. You can be a great listener. You can be empathetic and understanding. If you don't do what you say you're going to do, you might as well just be a jerk at the beginning, because no one's going to trust you. No one's going to want to follow what you say. No one's going to believe what you say because your words and your actions don't match up. And then the leader that you spoke about earlier, like, that's a true gift. And as a leader, you have to put yourself in, that is a true gift, to give the feedback. Well, you're asking me to do this, but you don't do it.
Hmm.
That is a gift. And a lot of times we don't like that. And it's tough to get that kind of feedback, but you're never going to grow if you don't. And I will say, the fact that someone felt safe, and maybe they were scared. A lot of times it's super scary to have a conversation like that with your leader. The fact that they were confident, or they felt like you could take it, but the fact that they're willing to give you the feedback, that says a lot about you. And then the thing that I believe is really important, because most people aren't like that. Most people will just avoid the conversation. They will physically avoid you. They see you coming and they will, head the opposite hallway. You need to be encouraging them to come to you with that kind of feedback. Like, I can take it and I want it and I want to get better. And going back to where we started, the only way I'm going to get better is if if I start getting 1-star reviews and do something to fix them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I think as leaders, we have to make ourselves available to that
Hmm.
feedback. I started doing that early. That happened early, and I was a 26 or 27-year-old leader at the time. So this was almost 30 years ago. I started doing that early because, I mean, we in the Army, you constantly get feedback. You do
Hmm.
push-ups. So I can't do as many as I thought I could, or sit-ups, or run. Right, your constant feedback mechanisms in the Army. Um, but I started asking people to give me feedback early on.
Who did you learn that from, or how did you learn that?
You know, part of it is self-inflicted, Phil. I just have this drive to be the best, right? To be
Mm.
better. Um, and so part of it is like I'm never good enough. Now that was probably the early driver of that. Like
Uh-huh.
I'm not good enough, so I need to get better. And that doesn't drive me today because I've dealt with that head trash.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I did have a leader that when I was in the Army, I was 23 at the time, and I'd kind of risen to a level of leadership, and I had a leader that was above me, and he said, "Mike, you've got a lot of potential, but you've got to learn to lead." and he gave me some feedback. He also gave me the first book I ever read as well, Phil, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
I love, yeah,
First
Covey.
book I ever read.
Yeah.
Look, I graduated high school. I'd been to college for 4 years. You know, I had done the stuff I needed to do, right? But I didn't read a book. I just did what I needed to do to get the, you know, the passing grade.
Yeah.
And that's all it was passing. But I had a leader who, you know, gave me feedback. You're like, I want you to grow, and I'm going to help you. And here's a book you need to get started with. And so I think it really began there. I was 23 at the time. But again, even though I knew feedback was good and I knew modeling was good, I still wasn't doing it some 4 years later, you know, where someone spoke and said, "Hey, Mike, you're asking me to do something you're not doing yourself." So again, it's a developed skill, partly because I wanted to be better, not feeling I was good enough, and then partly is I know it's the treasure chest key, right, to really getting better. It's feedback is your friend.
Totally.
Day. So, and I, you know, again, it's the most important thing is dealing with self. I want to talk to you about this idea you call the leadership judo move, because one of the biggest challenges every organization faces is communication challenges and conflict, getting along with each other, those kind of things. I deal with it every day with people that I work with. I'm sure you do as well. So talk to us about your leadership judo move and how it impacts those relationships.
So this relates completely to what we were just talking about. There's one of the concepts that I love is this idea of power distance. So in every power relationship, and that's at work. So there's the person, you know, on the org chart that's in a box above you. That could be your spouse. That could be your kid. It could be at your church. Like, you know, there are hierarchies and power relationships in everywhere we go. And there's this guy and his son, Hofstede, that did a lot of research around this idea of power distance. And the basic idea is that some people, and it can be cultural, it can be based on maybe you were ex-military, so you have a certain view of kind of people in higher, although you just gave a good example. You weren't the kind of person who necessarily cared what the rank was above me. Like, you were probably respectful, but you still were willing to speak truth to power. So that's somebody who has low power distance. That means that the authority and the power that this person has above me, I don't really think about that. I look at them a little bit more like my peer. So I feel safe and comfortable telling them the truth, telling them a suggestion that I have or a complaint that I have or whatever. And then at the other end of that spectrum, there's wide power distance, and wide power distance is super dangerous. So wide power distance is I'm focused totally on that this person can harm me, and that triggers fight or flight, and you will avoid them. You will not tell them what you think. You will mitigate your speech around them. You'll only go to them when it's a crisis situation. And a lot of times what happens is you end up in a crisis situation because somebody saw something and could have talked about it and brought it up early, and they don't bring it up until it's way too late. And so what we talk about is, as a leader, your whole job is to reduce power distance. And then the judo move is just one way that you can do that. And I call it a judo move because it's like in judo, you flip the person sort of using the power, you know, dynamic that they have going, right? And so in a relationship where you have someone who is experiencing power distance with you, where you're the high power person and they're the low power person, the judo move is asking for their advice. Because what that does is that for a minute flips the power dynamic. So now when you go and ask somebody advice, you're putting them into the higher power position, and and that advice, you know, you can ask them for advice on a lot of things, but one of the things you could ask them for advice on, we've talked about before, is, look, I feel like I'm blowing this as a leader. Like, I feel like I'm not serving you well, and I need your advice about how to do it better. That puts them in charge, and that you're going to have a different, better, high impact conversation if you're willing to just demote yourself for a little bit. And so that's the judo move.
That is so good, man. You took me right back to some challenges I had when I was in the military. And, you know, if you'd asked me before you gave us that lesson, how did you close the gap in the power?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking how I did that before you ever explained that. How I did that is I became a student first.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Same, yeah, same
I
thing.
listened first, right? I asked questions first. And so
I love that.
you
I
took me
might steal
right
that
back
from you.
yeah, you took me right back to a time when I challenged somebody in the military that outranked me by 2 ranks. And then she went to our boss who outranked her by 2 ranks.
Mm-hmm.
And
So now there's 4 ranks.
yeah, so
To you.
he's 4 ranks above me. And, she went to him to get me in trouble. I
Mm,
had a lot of respect because of who I was, the way I carried myself, the way I led. But when he called me in his office, I mean, that's the first thing I did is I became a student, right?
right.
I respected his position just like I did hers. But, I called her out because she was not being a leader in front of hundreds of other people, right? And I
Yeah.
challenged her on that in front of people. Probably shouldn't have done that, looking back, but I did. And at the end of the day, it all worked out because I, um, I was a student. I just, I respected the position. I asked, okay, how would you have handled it? What do you
Mm,
suggest I do different? How do you suggest I go communicate with that person now? And look, that was intuitive to me back there, Phil. I didn't know what I was doing. It was just
mhm.
something I did, right? It's who I
Yeah.
was back then. I've obviously gotten better at that. I love the analogy of judo because in judo, the martial art of judo, we're actually use the person's momentum, right?
Yep.
And I learned years ago the scarf method of communication. I don't know if you've ever heard of
I
it.
have heard of it.
And
Remind me again, what is
yeah,
scarf
I
stand?
can't remember what it's SCARF. I can't remember exactly what those stand for.
Mm.
Okay, it's been a while since I've studied it, but you reminded me I need to go back and study it. But
Yeah.
one of the things that they teach it at is to create an approach response, right?
Mm.
And we want, instead of creating fight or flight where people run from us or fight us, we want to create where they lean in.
Yeah.
It made me think of that when you were talking about that judo move. Get people to lean in and then use that as momentum to influence them forward, right?
Mhm.
But as leaders, look, I have to be careful with this because I used to create and still can a lot of fight or flight. I'm a very assertive, aggressive person.
Yeah.
I have to be in a really good mindset and energy state of mind, right?
Yeah.
Um, because I do come on pretty strong with people if I'm not careful.
Mhm.
And so yeah, okay, how do I connect? Like I make it look natural, when you and I got on, I'm immediately
Mhm.
trying to connect with you, just
Mhm.
having fun. That's not natural though. I've had to develop that because let's get to business. Like
Yeah.
I'm here to interview you, Phil. Let's go. You know,
Right. And I could totally see that in your personality, but it's like, it's so the reason you're successful and the reason that you are where you are is because you recognize that. And look, there's some people that are wired so that like that, they love that. So it's not like you need to um hide that part of you.
Mhm.
The key thing is just recognizing, just like you have some people, they respond in sort of fight or flight when they are around somebody like that. And so you recognizing that, then probably have some tools, not unlike what I just talked about. I'm sure you probably tell people like, hey, look, I get I can come on pretty strong. So you now have named the behavior. You make it okay to talk about. You can like self-deprecate about it a little bit. And then that lets people feel safe to then do what you just said. They can approach you. Um, but some people, they wear that behavior like a badge of honor, and
Mhm.
then they're going to have negative experiences as a leader if they do that.
Yeah. Yeah, so good. Luckily, we've all, hopefully you and I have learned this. We're still learning it, right? Still
Yeah.
learning to get better.
You
I
can
want
see
to
how gray my beard is. I'm like, yeah, it's taken me a while, but yeah,
I'm with you there. I'm with you. I want to talk about one more thing because I think this is important, and this will speak to the leader, the senior level leaders especially, and so they make a decision on whether they bring someone like you in to help them, right?
Mhm.
But what are some red flags that we need to be aware of that maybe our organization's in a crisis mode, maybe a leadership crisis mode,
Mhm.
um, that something may happen if they don't deal with it. maybe they deal with it internally, or maybe they look to a guy like you to bring in and help plug the holes a little bit. So let's talk to the senior leader that is thinking about, maybe not even aware that, hey, these are red flags, but they're thinking about, I got to do something.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably luckier than you in that, like, a lot of the clients that come to us, when I talk about this, I'm a labor lawyer. Like, I grew up, my training is labor law. Our consulting business is around labor relations. I kind of got into the leadership business because I had just been eyewitness to a whole bunch of leadership train wrecks. And because, people don't seek out a union when things are going great. In fact, no one wakes up thinking like the only thing missing from my life is I'm not a Teamster. Like, they're trying to solve a problem, and that's when we get asked to come in. And so in some ways we have a little bit, I mean, not all of our clients are like that, but like, we have it a little bit easier. Like, there's a very obvious red flag, which is that your company has got like a leadership train wreck happening, and you need to fix it quickly. And that is how we tend to intersect with a lot of our clients. And then at that point, they sort of, we unravel, okay, what's the leadership problem that has been the trigger to all this? And oftentimes it starts at the desk of the person who's in charge and works its way down. So there is that kind of a red flag, which is just, and it doesn't have to be a union campaign, but it can be an injury or, safety issue or a big quality issue, things like that. A lot of the stories, we talk about plane crashes. We talk about like the Challenger. There's a lot of examples of like major accidents that have happened where people in lower power positions knew what was going on. It could have been fixed. And the reason it wasn't is because people in higher power positions either refused to listen to the people around them that knew what was going on, or created a culture where bringing up anything that was bad news was not allowed.
Yeah.
And so the kinds of things that a leader could be on the lookout for, if they want to self-reflect a little bit, is those kinds of things. Are you always getting shocked by things that are out of control? Or things, no one is bringing you molehills. They're only bringing you mountains. So that is a leader in the wrong mindset looks at that and is just like, I'm surrounded by idiots. Nobody is telling me anything. That's the actor observer bias. A leader in the right headspace goes, what have I done to make it to where it's not okay to tell me about the molehill before it turns into the mountain? And what can I do to learn about more molehills? And if you get into that space, then, but the red flag, to your point, Mike, the red flag would just be, nobody ever tells me anything. Why am I always the last to know? Those are the sorts of things you would say to yourself that should be red flags to you that you are screwing up.
Yeah, that's so good. Great analogy. Love it. Love the molehill versus the mountain thing. Phil, we could, you and I could probably sit here and talk for hours about leadership and things. Time goes by fast when we're having a good conversation.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure, I'm conscious of the time here, but talk to our leaders. I'm talking to Phil Wilson, Lead Up listeners. He's written a book, 4 Simple Changes to Score Big and Unleash Your Team's Potential. The title of the book is The Leadershift Playbook. Phil, tell us where the book is available. How do they find you? How do they find the book to get the playbook in their own hands?
The book, it publishes April 1st, which I think will be after we publish here. So it should be available when you're hearing this. It's available anywhere you buy books. So you put in Leadershift Playbook, just those words, and it should pop up. The other, maybe even easier way, if you go to yourleadershift.com, all one word, yourleadershift.com, that takes you to our landing page. You can get an excerpt of the book for free if you want to try it before you buy it. There's buttons there that you can use to click on to go buy the book wherever you like to buy books. It's available everywhere you buy books. It's on Kindle. It's on the hardcover, and then we also have an Audible version that I don't think it's up today, but it'll be up probably by April 1st.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure that yourleadershift.com is in the show notes. So if you're listening to this podcast, go back to whatever platform you're listening on, find the link in your show notes. Make sure you connect with Phil Wilson on LinkedIn. Any other social channels you want to connect with people?
That's the two best places, either yourleadership.com or go to LinkedIn. And I'm just LinkedIn/PB Wilson, like peanut butter.
Right on. Phil, thanks for a great conversation.
Yeah, Mike, thank you.
Going to make the world a better place. And this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Great conversation.
Right on.